Hey everyone, let's get started with today's class and pick up where we left off last week. We're now on to the fourth lecture, talking about how artists create their artworks. We talked about how an artist, in their own unique creative realm, needs ongoing training to develop a whole bunch of creative skills. No doubt, an artist has to start off as a craftsman. A craftsman needs training, and that means mastering lots of techniques. But even if someone keeps growing in their artistic field after training, they're still just a craftsman. Why is that? It's like how we always tell apart a real painter from those who are just considered as artisans. Where does this difference come from? It's because for an artisan, skill is just skill, a means to an end. But for a true artist, their creative technique is how they experience the world. Sure, you might say they've mastered a bunch of techniques, but for them, these techniques are the tools through which they experience the world, and that's the real difference. Take Mozart, for instance. When he's feeling really intense and deep emotions, what comes to his mind? Music melodies. It's like the simplest form of music, a musical idea or motif, just naturally pops up. Now, what about a poet? They've got poetic thoughts bubbling up in their hearts. But these poetic thoughts are different from the emotions we want to express. When a poet's emotions kick in, those emotions are also poetic thoughts. And when a musician or composer gets emotional, what do they have at the same time? Musical ideas. You can't expect Mozart to start reciting a poem when he's feeling emotional. Even if you tried to make him, he couldn't do it because that's not his thing. He doesn't have the skills to write poetry. But he has the skills to make music, and these skills are not just about having that emotion, and then choosing those skills to express the emotion. No. When his emotions are aroused, he naturally forms the fundamental building blocks of art, such as poetic thoughts, or a painter's artistic vision. I'm not a painter, so I don't have any artistic intention when I'm feeling emotional. I mean, I haven't learned the skills of painting, so how could I have artistic vision? If I were a poet, I'd just have poetic thoughts. Musicians have musical ideas, that's it. Musical ideas, painting skills, and poetic thoughts all come from mastering the techniques in these three fields. For an artist, these skills are also the way they experience the world, and they're basically the same quality. So when Mozart says that no one has ever put as much effort into studying composition as he has, it shows that he's worked really hard and learned a lot about composing music. But what does all this learning mean for Mozart? It means he's learned different ways to experience the world. You might work just as hard as Mozart and put in a ton of effort studying composition, but you're not Mozart. Why? Because even if you put in all that effort, it just means you've learned the skills. For Mozart, it means he's gained a whole bunch of ways to experience the world. This idea brings the two together. If you take a dancer, when they're hit with strong emotions, they just can't help but let it out through their moves. Are these moves just skills? Yeah, they are, but what are they really expressing? It's an experience of life. So, these two things are what make up the third basic ability of an artist. Without this, you can't really be an artist. At best, you're just a craftsman. So, creative skills and craftsmanship skills are actually different. The skills a craftsman has are all about craftsmanship, not art. What do craftsmanship skills point to? The functionality and specific use of the object that's being made. On the other hand, artistic or creative skills are all about showing life experiences. Those are the two types of skills. When we're trained and growing in an artistic field, we shouldn't see the skills we pick up as just craftsmanship skills. They have to be the way we express our experience of the world. They're the tools we use to feel the world. So, in the first volume of Aesthetics, Hegel talks about the genius. He's pointing out what makes artistic geniuses stand out. He's like, yo, since way back, real geniuses have found it a piece of cake to master the skills needed to finish a work. They've got this special knack to make even the most boring and wild materials do what they're told. We usually think that the stuff artists use should be super special and out of the ordinary. But, fun fact, a lot of art is actually made using everyday, run-of-the-mill materials. If we're not artists, we might think these materials are snooze-worthy. But because artists blend their creative skills with their life experiences, even the most ordinary materials, when used by an artist's creative skills, come to life and become a standout display of the artist's take on the world. This brings to mind that poem by Du Fu, 8th century CE, upon hearing news of the recapture of Hunan and Hubei. We all know this poem like the back of our hand. What's the coolest part of this poem? In the last 2 lines, he drops 4 place names in a row, which is something poets usually don't do. I mean, place names are pretty dull, right? Let me spit it out. He's like, sudden news comes from the frontier, tears soak my clothes at the first hearing. My wife's sorrow evaporated, I throw down my books, elated. I must sing and drink liberally in the day, with my youth as companion, good to return home. Straight from the Ba Gorge through the Wu Gorge, then down to Xiangyang, heading for Luoyang. 4 place names, back to back in 2 lines. Ba, Wu, Xiangyang, Luoyang, 4 place names, all used together in 2 lines. Just like Hegel said, this is genius, making use of even the most mundane materials to express Du Fu's strong desire to return home. This ain't no coincidence. If you crank up the last part of Dvořák's Symphony No. 9, From the New World, what does it make you think of? Du Fu's poem. At that time, Dvořák was itching to get back to his hometown, Zurich. When he was in the US, he cooked up the big finish of From the New World with a build-up that's like a march, and it totally brings to mind Du Fu's lines. Straight through the Ba and Wu Gorges, then down from Xiangyang to Luoyang. Check out the 4th movement of From the New World, and you'll feel that same strong yearning from Du Fu's poem. In the middle part of the 4th movement of Dvořák's symphony, the whole orchestra is booming, like we're being swept along by a relentless wave. That's the vibe. These examples really show off the artist's skill. The way Dvořák put together the 4th movement of Symphony No. 9 is something special, right? But all these tricks are just to express Dvořák's homesickness and his burning desire to go back, and that's coming straight from his own experience. When we're learning an art form, we might not notice this at first. We're just picking up different techniques under our teacher's guidance, thinking it's all about mastering the skills. But as time goes on, you might start asking yourself, why is this part written like a chorus? And why is this section in a rondo form if it's music? Then it starts to click. The way this musical piece is structured and composed holds something deeper. It's a way of experiencing the world. So, I once had this professor, a professor from the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, tell me about a trip he took with his students to Huangshan in the 1980s. Back then, there were no cable cars, so they had to hike up the mountain. Along the way, they saw these porters lugging water and food for the tourists. The climb was tough for the porters, but as they trudged up, they started humming tunes naturally. My professor and his students were super tuned into the melodies created by the sounds of the porters' footsteps. They eventually noticed that these hummed tunes followed a certain pattern. Basically, they were based on 2 musical bits organized in an ABA format. The porters would sing one part, A, then switch to a different material, B, and then go back to the original, A, as they kept climbing. The professor explained to me that the creative structure of musical compositions reflects our emotions and is a way of experiencing life. It's not just about techniques, the emotional content of the work is just as important and should be fully integrated with the techniques. He pointed out how surprising this story was as it showed how music comes from the people and their lives. He stressed that music is a way of experiencing life, not just a bunch of technical skills. It was like going on a trip while also attending a class, using the porter's tunes as a teaching method.